So we are live. Right. So we will just give people a chance to join in, and I'll just get my breath, having just run upstairs to get my glasses so I can read the comments. Okay. So I think we'll just get started. We've got people beginning to join in now. Okay. So I think everybody knows who I am. And it's interesting that we have two physiotherapists on today as well. So if anybody's got any musculoskeletal questions, they can be asking those. Do you want to introduce yourself, Kay? Let people know who you are.
Yep. My name's Kay Bradley-Higgins. I trained as a SIRPA practitioner in 2015. I've worked in the NHS since I qualified in 91. Done lots of private work here and there. By default, ended up becoming very interested in treating back pain in particular. I've done a variety of courses over the years. I did a particular thing called the Sarah Key method, which is, I was demonstrating that when I met you, Georgie, at that expo thing. Mm-hmm. And I've used those two things predominantly since I did the SIRPA training in 2015. The SIRPA training was the missing piece for me, for those patients that just didn't seem to get better. So I found it really, really useful. However, it can be challenging using it in the NHS when people are not coming to you for the SIRPA approach. That, you know, you're trying to sort of convince them often, which is quite hard.
That's right. It's just really about sowing seeds, isn't it? But yes, it's more challenging, especially as they're usually coming to you because by then they're desperate to have a scan or they're desperate to have surgery or whatever, aren't they? Because you're a specialist musculoskeletal physio, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I work as an advanced practitioner in a musculoskeletal triage clinic. So I don't do routine physio anymore in terms of treatment. So it's a sort of see, advise and pass on kind of role. But like you say, it is a question of just sowing those seeds and giving people a little bit of insight that it's not all about the tissues. Yeah.
So it's really in your private work that you're able to actually work on SIRPA type work, isn't it? And help people in this way.
Yeah, and I think private patients are more open to it generally. I think what I need to do is progress myself so that I set people up to come for that now, rather than I'm not a businesswoman. I'm not very good at that side of things.
That's the trouble. Most people who set up their own business, they're not. They're very good at what they do, but then they've got to learn the other skills, haven't they? Yeah.
But my little extension is nearly finished. The man's painting it as we speak, so fingers crossed. And I won't have to do my little things in the dining room for much longer.
Right. So, yeah, that'll be your space. Well, I just want to say hello to everybody as you're joining, and by all means, pop in a comment. Let us know. I can see the numbers, but I can't see who it is. So if you want to pop in and say hello. And of course, we're here for you. So if you have any questions at all about things that you've read or experiences you've had, or even some exciting things that you've experienced or evidence that you've found yourself for your symptoms, to recognise that they're not physical. And in the meantime, Kay, you were mentioning earlier to me briefly about a paper that you'd come across, didn't you, about hip arthritis?
Yeah, so it was basically saying a lot of the things that we already know, in that, there's no correlation between the degree of osteoarthritis in the hip on X-ray and the severity of the pain. But they did a variety of measurements and tests and confirmed that there is a degree of central sensitization. And I mean, whilst it wasn't about the SIRPA approach, it was more about the sort of pain, the sort of explain pain type thing, and that the patients who reported severe pain may have had quite mild changes on X-ray, but they scored very highly on the pain sensitization tests, which was being sensitive, when they were given pressure in different areas away from the hip, they were still very sensitive, as well as obviously more pressure around the hip made that, that it took a lot less pressure for them to trigger a pain response than the ones that didn't have the sensitivity scores.
Yeah, great.
So I'm happy to share that with you, and you can share that with the group.
Yeah, yes, that would be great. Thank you. We can definitely put that on either in the Facebook group or Facebook page or whatever. But yes, definitely. Is that a more recent study then?
I think so. I don't think it was. I'll find it and send it. I don't think it was an old one. I think it was quite a recent one. I think it was a Japanese study that's been translated into English. I presume pre-pandemic.
Yes. Yeah. And that's good though, isn't it? That it's again showing not just the back, but actually the hip or another joint, because so often people complain that everything that is about back pain, for example, and so it's nice to be able to see studies about chronic pain in other areas. And on our infographic, we have information that we have a paper about hip pain. I think that one's about ice hockey players, and they found, I think it was about 77% of these professional ice hockey players actually had degeneration in their hip, and yet they were playing at an elite level. So that's quite significant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Johnny has said
like labral tears as well.
Sorry, Kate. I'll just say here that Johnny was saying, will this video be saved on your page? Yes, all these Facebook Live videos are recorded and saved on the Facebook page. So hello, Johnny. Hello, Peter. I know there are plenty more people as well. So do come on, say hello, and ask some questions, because this is about you rather than Kay and I just having a little chat together. So yes, you were saying about labral tears being involved in that as well, and that's often when they have surgery, isn't it, to actually sort out the labral tears.
Yeah. But I think one of the downsides to the go on.
No, you carry on.
All right, I was going to say it's one of the downsides to imaging, isn't it? Because 20 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to identify labral tears of the hip, and now we can identify them. But how many people have them and don't have symptoms? And so these people that go through quite invasive surgery, actually, the hip arthroscopies, and the quite intense rehab afterwards for something that maybe loads of us have and we don't know it. It's just that somebody's happened to have an MRI scan.
Yes, and evidence has shown now that actually if you have an MRI scan and you're told all these scary things that are happening, it actually increases your chance of the pain being persistent as well, not surprisingly.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I come across a lot in my role. Only last week I had one chap who was probably in his early 50s, and he came with his wife, who quietly sobbed at me because the GP had said, oh, you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that. If you carry on, you'll end up in a wheelchair.
Oh, dear.
His MRI is pretty normal, I could see.
You're
another 26-year-old.
Sorry, Kay. I think although we thought we'd sorted the internet, it's not
still
great, and I think this is why we're going over each other a bit. So we're missing bits of it. So can you just repeat what you said there, please?
So I had a gentleman last week, and his GP had told him that he had degenerative change on his MRI scan, and that if he wasn't careful and didn't stop lifting and so on, that he would end up in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So obviously I was trying to undo that myth for him, because his MRI scan just wasn't that bad.
Really?
And I had a young girl as well who was 26, but the GP had told her she had the spine of a 40-year-old. So things like that don't help.
They don't at all. And I remember actually seeing a guy who I think at that time, it was years and years ago, in his 40s, mid-40s, I think, who had been a professional rugby player. And he had been told when he finished his career, he was struggling with pain towards the end of his career. Then he actually tried to carry on, but then had to finish. Excuse me. And he was told he had scans, and he was told that his as he put it, a good Yorkshireman, I was told my back was broke. And, if you're going around, you're a professional rugby player, big guy, and he's been told his back's broke, then of course he's going to be very cautious, really careful. So of course he started doing a lot less, he put on weight, he was less active, and really struggling to walk very far at all. And he really wanted to be able to be active again and play football with his son, for example. And so I was trying to explain to him about, first of all, finding the links. So the pain started at the end of his career, and yet I said, when I asked him, so what was the cause of, if you feel you had an injury, when do you think, what was the injury? He said, I think it was a really big tackle that I had. I said, well, when was that? 5 years before the pain came on. And I said, well, did you have any trouble at that point? No, but it must have been that caused the problem. So I was then trying to explain to him about for example, the pressure of being a professional athlete, coming to the end of your career and competing against a lot younger people, and then having to consider another career change and moving into something else. And he actually did really, really well. But it was helped by the fact that he also then was told by somebody else who looked at his recent scan to say that actually, well, that's just a typical rugby player's back. But what a shame that actually he'd been told that his back was broken, basically, because we're very good at imagery, aren't we? We're really good at imagining things. And some people say, I can't visualize, but actually we do all the time. If you just say, I don't know, I want to go to bed, often we'll think about the bed. Or I was talking about this with a patient yesterday and saying, if you just say, well, I wonder when my husband's going to come home. As I said that, I had an image of my husband in my head. So if we then are really good at, we then spend our time imagining things like a broken back, and the problems and the issues that they believe are going on there, they're just reinforcing it, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that idea that we can't visualize, I think we do it all the time automatically, but when you sit down and try to do it, I think that then you think you can't do it, if you see what I mean. When you try, it becomes much more difficult than when it's just automatic.
Yeah. Also, people.
Excuse my husband. I'm walking in and out.
Talking about husbands. And I think the other thing is that I've started using the term imagery more than visualization, because people feel that they've got to be able to see, whereas actually often it's about feeling it, or maybe you hear, or maybe movement helps as well. So sometimes when people think that, then they find it's helpful. But even if you just say to somebody, can you imagine your front door, now walk in your front door in your imagination, and then walk into your kitchen, and then go upstairs, people can do that. So if they can do that, then they can visualize or imagine. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go to a question here now. So Ruth says, I've linked my chronic pain, which is sciatica, with mind-body syndrome. Even though I can rationalize this, I'm finding that as I try to increase my activity and go back to work, I'm having a lot more pain and fatigue, sitting stationary at a desk, stroke gardening, etc. Is there anything you can advise for managing this? So, shall I pass that over to you then, Kay? Do you want to say something first?
Yeah, I think I think sciatica is quite a difficult one, and I have had a bout of that myself. And I think if we associate it with different things, so for me, it's sitting when mine comes on, and sometimes the automatic programming that you've developed. So it's about thinking more widely about what your triggers are and what you're doing when you're sitting and things like that, because often it's work and we perhaps don't always want to be there, but also about making regular breaks. I think whilst I know that from the whole mind body point of view we're trying to get away from physical cures, but I do feel that the movement is essential for health, and I don't think we're designed to sit for long periods, so we need to factor in breaks and build things up gradually if that's a really big issue. And if you need that, I mean, I would say I'd quite often say to people, if you need them in the short term, to take some painkillers to try and break that to take the pain away, to allow you to do things for longer, so that you're breaking that pattern. It's breaking down the patterns, I think, is more than anything else.
Yeah, I think,
as well as identifying with the TMS what the triggers are. So I'm assuming that she's doing all the other work with the journaling and the self-induced pressures, because that's a really big one for me.
Yeah, and maybe Ruth, maybe you can add a little bit to that as to what you are currently doing. But yeah, I think for me it's like, if you are, like you say, that we are not designed to sit for long periods of time. If we are dehydrated, we'll get thirsty and we will need to have a drink. And if we don't have a drink, it'll get worse and worse. If we're hungry, we might have hunger pangs. And then the longer we avoid eating something, the more painful that becomes as well. And this is the same. If we just sit for long periods, then it's really just our brain giving us that signal that, okay, it's time to move. And if we ignore it, it'll get worse. Now, for me, one of those symptoms used to be an area in the top of my shoulder here, my upper trapezius, after an riding accident where I actually ruptured some of the tendons there. So I have scar tissue there. But you know what? It's not painful, but it used to be at times. And it would be when I was sitting driving for a long period of time, or I was sitting at the computer. And it got worse after I'd been under a lot of pressure. So I think I'd spent 6 hours doing my CV once, ridiculously, in a difficult position. And I perceived then, because I was this conventional physiotherapist, that it was sitting in an awkward position that had done it. Not really thinking about the fact that how good is it, how healthy was it for me to sit for 6 hours, and the pressure of actually bringing this all up to date and applying for a new job. And after that, then it would come more often, usually within about 20 minutes of sitting at the computer. And then when I realized that it was just a learned neural pathway that was sensitized, then I began working on it. Now, if I sat here and it resolved, and I rarely ever have problems with it. If I did sit here for, probably 4 or 5 hours without a break, probably that neural pathway would be triggered. But instead of just persisting these days, I would take that as a cue to, okay, get up, move about, this is ridiculous. So I think there's a lot more, we don't know what you're doing, Ruth, so that's the issue. But it is, if there's fear related to it, if you're going back to work, again, we don't know how you feel about going back to work. We don't know, like Kay said, even just whether you're enjoying work, or is it causing a lot of stress, or is that particular piece of work you're doing one day causing more stress, then the pain might be worse. Or it could be completely conditioned, and when you sit down you have pain, or when you're at work sitting down you have pain. And again, it's like Kay, you said, it's about cues. And I remember when I left the NHS, so that was back in 2005, and set up my own business, I woke up one morning with sciatica, horrendous sciatica, and for a couple of weeks I couldn't put my shoes and socks on. So, and I remember when I had the pain, I was literally, oh my God, I can't move, I couldn't bend forward, I was rigid, which, what happens, pain. I woke up with pain. I had not injured myself. And actually, by going rigid, it was building on the fight or flight, which causes tension. And so it was actually then creating even more tension and more pain. Now, I did develop acute back pain 3 years ago when I went on holiday. And that's the first time I've had any, well, with sciatica, it's the first time I've had any since I started doing this work. So it was really a surprise. But there had been a lot of, we hadn't had a holiday for 3 years because of my husband's work. There'd been a lot of toing and froing as to whether we could go, and we got a week's notice. But I think the main thing was on the aeroplane going out was suddenly hearing that my mother-in-law had been taken to hospital, and we weren't there to do anything about it. By the time we landed, we'd found out that she'd been sent home and she was okay. And you know what? I didn't journal. I didn't do anything. We were on holiday for the first time in 3 years, and I just wanted to enjoy my holiday. And we were feeling fine because, oh, she's all right. Just none of us are perfect. We don't do everything perfectly all the time. And I went to bed, and I woke up in the morning and I couldn't move. I just woke up and initially just like, oh, with the pain. And then immediately, because of now my conditioning and understanding this, it was, oh, I thought I dealt with everything. What's going on now? And I responded in a very different way. Rather than reacting with tension, I remember just completely relaxing back, slowing my breathing right down calmly. I rolled over and sat up on the edge of the bed. And then I remember actually just noticing how I was feeling. I put my hand on my heart and said, I feel you, I hear you, I love you. Okay, there's a lot been going on, but you know what? It's okay, we're safe. And I was imagining talking to my inner child, my little 4-year-old. And I remember saying, we're okay. What we'll do though today, we'll just sit on the beach and we'll just completely relax. We'll do some journaling, do some meditation, have a little wander in these beautiful surroundings. And everything's fine, and we'll get through this and we'll deal with it. And I got dressed. And as I started bending over, yes, the pain initially increased, but I actually just took a deep breath in and I breathed out and carried on going down, and it eased off. And I did do the journaling meditation and everything. And it settled right down. And I remember that night saying to myself, in the morning, when we get up, let's go for a run on the beach, and we'll go for a swim and then meditate in that beautiful gazebo. And when I woke up, yes, I had pain, maybe only but then by about a 4. But I did get up. I did go, started walking, and then started running, and then swam and meditated. By the end of that day, it was almost gone. And I think it's the difference when we think of pain as something to resist and something that's there to make life difficult, rather than recognizing it's a signal. It's like our inner child or that vulnerable part of us who's freaking out, who's not feeling safe. And if we can then be kind and self-compassionate and self-soothe, as well as deal with the emotional stuff going on, we've got more chance of helping. And so going back to Catherine, no, it wasn't Catherine, we haven't got to yet, Catherine, back to Ruth. So much more, some that can be done about this, but we don't know what you're doing already. And visualization can help, journaling to explore your triggers and things, reframing, rationalizing your thoughts. There's quite a lot that you can actually do to start unpicking what's going on, and then to start really developing healthier neural pathways. Anything else you want to add, Kay, before we move on?
No, I think the only other thing I was thinking of was like the self-induced pressures at work of, when you've been off and you think you've not caught up, and you're going to have all this pressure to get your job done, and they're expecting you to work at the pace that you used to work at, and that sort of thing. And sometimes that's a bit unconscious, and journaling about that can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that time to just find space and really beginning to develop much more emotional awareness, so you become more aware of how you're feeling. So let's move on to Catherine, who says, I have a question. As having recovered from terrible back pain following John Sarno's book, I now have some mild arthritis, but mysteriously a swollen left foot, toes and ankle, which started with pain a year ago but doesn't hurt now. I've had investigations and the doctors can't explain it. My back pain was mainly left-sided, so I think it's related. I really want to get this swelling down, but I don't know how to, as I've done a lot of emotional release via hypnotherapy over the years. And yet this, is there any more to that? I think that was it. And yet this. Okay, so again, a lot there. The main thing I would pick up on is that you have some mild arthritis. So yes, I do. In fact, I had problems with my hands and feet when I was 40. I'm now just turned 60. And that arthritis is probably significantly worse. But although I had acute pain in my when I was 40, when I first knew it and had x-rays, and they found a loose body in my thumb and my big toe, luckily I saw a specialist who just said, oh, just do what you want, play tennis, do what you want, it'll settle. And it did settle. And looking back now, I can see it was a very challenging time in my life. And I don't have problems. I've got arthritis. So remember, the studies that don't link the amount of arthritis, as you said at the beginning, Kay, about hips. Studies don't show any correlation between the amount of arthritis people have and pain. So I think that's just one thing I want to point out. So you mysteriously have a swollen left foot and toes and ankle, which started with pain a year ago but doesn't hurt now. So you don't mention an accident or anything, but let's say that you injured it a year ago and it was painful a year ago. There's no reason now why it should continue to be painful, and if not painful, having with swelling. And I think I just want to mention swelling as being, that's part of our immune system. And actually that can be involved in this whole concept as well. Wait a minute. So Catherine says, I wondered if the swelling was due to fibromyalgia, as I believe this can cause unexplained swelling. Well, fibromyalgia, thank you, Catherine, no damage. So fibromyalgia generally is due to tender areas, isn't it? It's at least 11 areas out of 18 tender spots in the body. But I'm not aware that the diagnosis of fibromyalgia includes swelling, but I would absolutely be sure that many people with fibromyalgia do have swelling. Would you agree, Kay?
Yeah, I think swelling, I think a lot of people describe swelling, quite often with no known cause. And I think, like you say, it is part of the immune system. So whether it's just another symptom imperative to make you take notice of an area of the body, because I suppose if you've come to grips with the idea that pain is your body's way of telling you that there's something that you haven't dealt with, and you learn to accept that and work with it, then maybe the swelling is the next sort of stage for the symptom imperative. But if there's not been an injury, and they can't find a cause for it, but I mean, arthritis when it's mild doesn't tend to cause swelling. Did she mention which joints the arthritis was in?
You did you, Catherine?
So,
but except saying that the swelling is in the foot and ankle. So she also says, I do sometimes have some cramp-like pain in the left calf.
So I think, right, okay, so that wouldn't really fit either, would it, with a certainly a back problem, in terms of, because she mentioned an earlier back problem that would cause swelling. Usually cause cramps. So I think it would be the TMS and looking at the underlying cause again. I can't think of anything else that would do that in a specific area, but it is it's something that we come across quite commonly, that people describe swelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly I came across this really early, in fact, even before I went to see Dr. Sano, because I remember discussing this patient with him when I went to see him, and having a lady who came to me with swollen hands and feet, and she couldn't wear heels, couldn't wear rings, And she ended up with a diagnosis of lupus, but she did incredibly. She was insistent she wanted to do this work, and she'd read Dr. Salmer's books and absolutely was convinced that because she'd had 3 major stressors in the previous 18 months that this was TMS, and because she was waiting to see the specialist, I took her on and we worked together. And she did really well, and this is like 14 years later, and is still really well. But I think the interesting thing there was that it was less about pain and more about swelling, and significant swelling, which she managed to resolve. And she's, despite the fact she had a diagnosis of lupus and taking aspirin because they're otherwise, it could be catastrophic. She refused to take anything else, and she did very well. The other thing is that I've seen this in many other people, and then I experienced it myself maybe 5 years ago when I was standing in my mother-in-law's living room, and it suddenly felt like a knife stabbing in my left ankle. Now, it was quite late in the evening. I wonder who's going to be listening to this in my family, but anyway, it was quite late in the evening, and I was passing my mother-in-law's house, bearing in mind she had severe dementia, and this was before she went into a home, and we were just about coping with a lot of care as well. And the lights were on, so I'd gone in. And actually, she was downstairs, but she had messed herself, basically. So I was having to clean her up. So I did all that, and then I was just standing talking to her and trying to get her back upstairs. And I remember suddenly just feeling like this knife in my ankle. And I remember just laughing, actually, because I just thought, oh, it was typical. Because, did I really want to be doing that at that point? Because really, it was late at night, and I just wanted to go to bed. And did I want to do it anyway? And it just, I'd been running that morning. I had no problems with my feet or anything. And yet I ended up with, first of all, just pain in the ankle. And then again, this sounds awful. I'm sure it's only these 2 times when I haven't really dealt with the emotional side that I went to bed and woke up in the morning, and that whole peroneal tendon around my ankle was swollen. And I was, really interested, because I just thought if I went to any traditional conventional physio or doctor, I would have been told I had peroneal tendonitis, because look, it was there, tender to touch, acute, swollen, painful. But I journaled, and I wrote an unsent letter to my mother-in-law, and then I actually rationalized it and put it into perspective, and reminded myself that I like to support her, I want to be there for her, but I had been feeling resentful. So it was about putting it back into perspective, getting my mindset right, and I was back running the next day. But that really showed on a personal level that swelling can happen, and that's because when we go into fight or flight, if a lion is chasing a deer, let's say a deer is grazing, completely relaxed, and sees a lion, then the lion is going to trigger that fight or flight response with heart pounding and the breathing more up in the chest and faster, and the tension in the limbs so that it can run. But at the same time, the immune system is triggered, because if it's injured, then the body wants to heal as soon as possible. So in that case, I had the physical sensation of pain, but I also that then, because it was in fight or flight, protecting me from actually saying how I really felt, which was not appropriate. But by bottling up, repressing how I was feeling, just automatically my unconscious mind knew that was threatening to me, that you can't do that. And actually it manifested in that pain initially, and then swelling, and the immune system is slower acting, isn't it, than the neural pathways for pain. So, and the other thing I would say, Catherine, is that if you've got fibromyalgia, again, great. Fibromyalgia is just another form of TMS, mind-body condition. And so that, again, is something that you will be able to deal with as well. But if it's unexplained swelling, absolutely, that's just part and parcel of all this.
Does it prevent us from doing anything as well? Is there a benefit from the swelling? Does it stop her doing something that she perhaps doesn't really want to do?
Yeah. That can play a part as well, definitely. Okay, so I hope that's helped, Catherine. And in the meantime, shall we move on to Donna, who says that she first saw a back specialist in London when she was 10 years old. I was told the pain was due to the operations I'd had, all abdominal surgeries. I've struggled throughout my entire adult life, especially with pain and range of movement. My last 2 MRIs showed lower disc prolapse, so of course I assumed the pain was due to this. I can't imagine it was prolapse for all those years though. I'm really trying to be mindful and tell myself the pain isn't coming from the disc. But I'm getting, let me just see if I can show this a bit more. No, see, I can't get that any more of that. Okay, so that's all it's showing.
It did pop up briefly then.
Yeah, it popped up, but it's still only got to that I'm getting. And so I'm not getting the rest of that.
Right.
But okay, so yeah. Kay, do you want to start?
Well, I think it. Yep. There's again similar to the hip osteoarthritis. There's no correlation between MRI findings and slip discs and symptoms. I've seen some MRIs where they've got terrible slip discs, but they barely have any pain. And similarly, I've seen plenty of people with perfectly normal MRIs who are in terrible pain. So from the, I mean, it's quite traumatic, isn't it, having to go through abdominal surgery in childhood. I don't know, doesn't say what for, but you know that and to be subjected to any sort of intensive medical procedures when you're young is quite stressful. So whilst the abdominal surgery happened, the tissues will have repaired afterwards. Maybe the muscles are not quite as strong as they might be, but it's been so long now that there'll be plenty of scar tissue and plenty of muscle that's developed in a normal repair. So there's no reason why that should be contributing to the back pain after all these years. So I suspect it's more tied up with the burden of having to have procedures like that at such an early age. It must have been quite frightening, really.
Definitely. Well, it is considered one of the new sort of adverse childhood experiences, accepted as an adverse childhood experience. And then to go and see a back specialist and then believe, you've grown up with that belief that there's something wrong with your back. This is not just, okay, I've had an injury and got back pain, and that you can really pinpoint it to one thing. So, I mean, I don't know what you've done so far, Donna, as far as this approach. But don't forget that even when people have read the books or sometimes followed the online programs or follow Curable, for example, and quite often just having some one-to-one support and guidance can be really helpful to help, working with somebody who understands all this. It just can be really helpful to be able to help you put things together and then understand what to work on. But some of that would be, yes, for example, journaling about that if you can remember that time, sometimes imagining yourself at that age and journaling either to somebody at the time, or sometimes it can be helpful to journal. Imagine you are that 10-year-old child and then you're writing to yourself now, and you're writing to the older, wiser you who really understands what you went through, and therefore you can really listen and they know that you're listening. And being empathic, and then what you can do is you can write back to that younger child as well. But I think see how you go with the advice that's out there, Donna. And many of us offer free calls that you can book and have a chat and just see if there's anything else that might be helpful for you. One of the other things as well is, of course, at the moment still we have the Mind Body Wellness series of webinars that's still on our training platform, and these are weekly webinars that I recorded in the first lockdown over a year ago now, wasn't it? This was covering all the main things involved with the work that I do one-to-one with clients, but in a group setting. And then we recorded it and put it on the training platform. We've actually had well over 500 people who've booked on it, and we've left it up there as just a real low-cost online program for people to follow. And it's just 12 webinars with me speaking to a group of people, and then also we uploaded strategies and things. And I won't be able to do it right now, but later on I'll add the link. If I'll write that down, I'll add the link into the comments under here later on. So, but hopefully that would be helpful. And then really, once you've do what you can yourself, Donna, and if you feel it would be helpful to talk to somebody, even just for a free chat, to see what else might be worthwhile, then you can always contact one of us from the Find a Practitioner page on the SIRPA website. So Ruth, whose question we answered earlier, says, thank you, Georgie and Kay, you've given me a lot of food for thought. And then we've got Fiona. I haven't scrolled down then, so okay, let's go on to, right, so Donna says, cross on my painful days. Oh, right, was that the end of it, Donna? And I'm getting cross on my painful days. Okay, so before we move on, let's just talk about that. If you're being cross on your painful days, and I know it's so easy to fall into that, and it's understandable. But this is about, the more cross, frustrated, upset you are, the more this can actually ramp up the pain. Whereas actually, if you are able to acknowledge and express how you're feeling and reach a point of acceptance that, okay, we all have good and bad days, this is not a good day, so what can you do to, with some self-compassion, to actually help you on those days? And doing some emotional awareness, so somatic tracking, journaling, something like that, and even just calm, slow, deep breathing can be helpful.
That being cross creates a lot of tension, which tends to make back pain in particular worse, I think, as well.
Yeah. Well, it does, and MRI scans show that, don't they? Functional MRI scans. Because if you're cross, you're in your head frustrated, and you can imagine how that would cause tension. But the functional MRI scan shows that the more we are ruminating in our head and worrying or anxious, the more that exacerbates pain. So This is why the more we can, catastrophize and express how you feel, but then rationalize it, put it into perspective, and look at what you can do in a self-compassionate way. If you think about this pain as being like your inner child crying out for help, would you be cross with the child because it's playing up one day? Okay, maybe you would actually, but hopefully not. Hopefully, by understanding all this about emotional awareness, if they are playing up, there's a reason for them playing up. So, we should all be considering that and looking at, okay, why are they playing up? So again, it's about exploring that. Okay, so let me just go back up. With Catherine says, oh yeah, you did mention sometimes you have cramp-like pain in your left calf, and that's an interesting one as well, Catherine. That's very much a TMS symptom. And interestingly, when I started with cramp a few months ago while meditating, I just focused on the meditation and how I was feeling, and that cramp just calmed down straight away. So do notice whenever pain goes up, or whenever you get a cramp or anything like that, how are you feeling, what's going on, even if you have no idea, and actually ruminating and analyzing can make it worse. But if you just pause in that moment, slow your breathing down, and then just do some emotional awareness, just observe how you're feeling, and then kindly and reassuringly, self-talk, soothe yourself. So pause, breathe, feel, reassure. So just literally pause when you notice, slow your breathing right down so you're really calm, and then just notice how you're feeling, and then use your name and actually say, for me it would be, okay, Georgie, you know what, you're doing really well. Everything's fine, you're safe. Okay, everything's fine. And whatever you say, or whatever's going on, it will depend on what you say, but that can be helpful. So Catherine also said, I've done a lot of emotional release and don't know how to go forward. So again, that might well be that having some one-to-one guidance may be helpful moving forward. So just maybe consider that, even if it's just initially, Catherine, a free call to see what might be helpful, or exploring some other things as well. Right, wait a minute, another one from Catherine. When it happened, I had resentment about my son-in-law. I was aware of that from my back work and tried to release it, but maybe I haven't got there yet. This is helpful, good. Okay, so yes, again, acknowledge how you are feeling. It's sometimes dealing with that initial thing can be very, very helpful. Sometimes there's still, because it's become conditioned and sensitized, that's why it's persisting. And then it can be, if it's oversensitized, then even just a thought, or just a worry or a stress about something else can trigger it. So this might just be a conditioned neural pathway that's become sensitized and therefore more easily triggered by other things, not just your son-in-law. Okay, so Lucinda says, Georgie, could you explain again how your subconscious reacted to your resentment to your mother-in-law? Didn't quite understand what you said it was feeling about this. Okay, well, Lucinda, I'm trying not, this is quite a personal issue, so I'm trying not to say too much. Basically, what I was trying to say was my unconscious, my primal brain was protecting me from telling my mother-in-law how I was feeling in that moment. Okay, that would not have served me well or her well, and it's also not who I am. Okay, I'm a nice, kind person, or that's how I like to think of myself. And so actually, and I'm a goodist, I'm absolutely goodist and worry what other people think. And therefore, for my primal brain has learned that to be rude to somebody or to be angry, it definitely learned that when I was younger, is not good. It's not safe. So if this anger, frustration, resentment started surfacing within me, then my primal brain is going to go, oh, no, you don't go there. That's not safe. Hence the pain. So I hope that helped, Lucinda. Okay, we've got another one from Johnny. So, can you talk about mind-body treatment and RSI, specifically bilateral cubital tunnel stroke ulnar nerve issues with carpal tunnel-like symptoms as well, caused by painful computer use? Also have allodynia in my palm, mild hypersensitivity at the elbow, non-textbook symptoms like occasional skin crawling, tingling. Yeah, those are common too. And tight trapezius neck with some pain. I just find it interesting when you're saying specifically, because this feels like so many people who are trying to prove that their symptoms are TMS, and therefore wanting to be really specific and maybe see other recovery stories that have exactly the same. And actually the symptoms are less important than the actual process, the actual treatment that we do. So I understand where you're coming from, but unfortunately, often this focusing specifically on symptoms and trying to prove it's either not physical or prove it's mind-body symptom can cause more stress. But having said that, if there's somebody who needs that information, then yes, you need that information to then be able to reach to that point where you reach a point of acceptance. So, do you want to comment on that before we move on to the rest of it?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, what you read out is very medicalized, and I'm guessing that with those kind of diagnoses that he's had nerve conduction studies to tell him he's got, cubital tunnel syndrome and ulnar neuropathy and so on. But again, with the nerve conduction studies, just as with X-rays and MRI scans, you get a lot of false positives and false negatives. So you can get people who've got, that it comes back and says they've got terrible carpal tunnel syndrome, but actually they've hardly got any symptoms, and vice versa. So I think it's that the problem is, if we see medical people, we get very medical model answers.
Yeah. And
most of the people that you see in the NHS will not know about this work, and it won't cross their mind to think, to look at the whole picture. So they focus in very much on the specific area and looking for specific problems, and then they find them and put 2 and 2 together and make 5.
Absolutely. And they're just looking for the physical because they won't be aware of the mind-body side. And as Johnny said, that's very interesting. I have normal EMGs, which is great.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing that's like when I said about all these tests, MRIs and things, when you're being told things like, cubital tunnel, ulnar nerve issues with carpal tunnel, whatever, all this is really medicalizing things and making us fearful by using all these terms. And in fact, I'm always interested when a patient comes to me and they talk, one of them was immediately saying, oh, my QL hurts when I do this, and that's not uncommon. But it means that straight away I know, okay, I've seen a lot of medical practitioners. They know a lot. They've probably read an awful lot about it, Googled a lot, and we've got a lot of unraveling to do. So, okay, so everything that you've said, Johnny, are really common mind-body conditions. The fact that you said that your EMGs are normal. I don't know if any of your other tests have come up with anything. Maybe you could let us know. I'm just going to put this on the screen because I can't read the end of it, and just see whether we can. No, see, it only shows a bit. So I've been trying to decide between pursuing, or is there any issue, contraindication to pursue all three mind-body methods like SANAs and SIRPA. Right, I'm not sure what you mean by all three. If you're talking about SANA and SIRPA as being two different ones, then I would suggest not. It's two sides of the same coin. It just expands. SIRPA's work expands on Dr. SANA's work, this pioneering, amazing work, but increases, this is about building on the self-empowering work that individuals can do. Okay, so Johnny says, SIRPA recommended by Central London RSI group members. Oh yeah, I remember speaking to them. Central sensitized syndrome type stuff. Okay, we're talking about this as being a typical central sensitization. And physical occupational therapy like posture improvements, mostly told coming from my neck by PTs, trying to pass out what is physical and what is mind-body. He's been told that the cubital carpal tunnel by some people, hypersensitive nerves by others. My pain typing started shortly after mother's death. Significant there. How to tell the difference and how to approach and do the most effective treatment to get better. Okay, thank you, Johnny. I don't know why it only takes only half a comment. I think that's very indicative, though, Johnny, the fact that you say the symptoms came on after your mother died. These are all physical symptoms you're experiencing, or whatever symptoms we have, it's that the brain can produce, the mind can trigger as well. And you don't need to have a physical injury, and repetitiveness cannot cause injuries. So I would suggest that if you have physiotherapy, physical treatment by a conventional physiotherapist who doesn't understand the mind's involvement, and you're doing specific physical work on your arms, then you're best not having that with following this approach, because each time you have go to a physio who's doing specific treatment on a physical problem, it's reinforcing to your mind that, okay, this is a physical problem. The other thing is that if you're doing two things at the same time, how do you know what's working? And so if I was working with somebody, I would be saying that now's the time to go as far as you want with the physical side, and if you're not ready to stop yet, and when you're ready to stop, then look at this. In the meantime, yes, of course, you can still do some of the stress stuff, working on stress, doing some journaling, things like that. But sitting on the fence often doesn't help because it's causing inner turmoil. What do you think, though?
Well, I would totally agree with that. But I think, that again, with the posture, there's no good evidence that particular postures are, and I think that is a very physio thing. Physios get really hung up about posture and, you've got to correct this and you've got to correct that. And I just don't think it's important anymore. I think, your posture is your posture. You've probably been like that all your life. What's important is not being in the same posture for hours on end. And as long as your posture is good and you're moving around some of the time, I don't think it matters if it's bad some of the time. And I think we get hung up about, having the keyboard at the right place. But I mean, if we think about RSI, it's a relatively new condition on something that we do typing on keyboards that you barely have to touch them and the types the letter, as opposed to in the old days when most of the typing was done by women, on really, you had to really hit them hard. My mum used to be a typist, and to get the keys to work, it was much more effort than using a modern keyboard. So it is a very new sort of condition, really. And I think as long as we're not sitting at a computer for hours on end, I wouldn't worry about posture is the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you beat yourself up about it.
Yeah. And I think the main thing here is that, if you've had physiotherapy, if you've had treatment for an acute condition and it's persisted, then why is it persisting? And when it becomes a chronic condition, your body heals. We have an innate ability to heal. So if it hasn't actually, if you're still persisting with pain, then you would absolutely benefit from looking at this sort of approach, definitely. I mean, both of us being physios, I agree. I think the thing I wanted to comment on was that movement's great, movement's good. So doing general movements is, so I've just been thrown by a couple of comments. I will come to those. The movement is really good, and in fact it's National Walking Week this week, and I know we've got a blog that I think we've posted a conversation between two of our other practitioners, one physio, one psychotherapist, about mobility and the importance of mobility and how good that is for our health and well-being, and that's between Carol Rendell and Irili. Andrzej Jauska. Sorry, Irili. I can spell it now, but I can't say it. So we've got that, I think, already on the Facebook page, but I'll check. And also we're about to post a blog that Irily's just written about walking and the importance of the movement, walking through with movement. So generally, we would still encourage people move, and like Kay said, not sitting around, for too long, because we've got so many joints, they're designed to be moved. But actually going to a specific physical therapist to treat what they believe is a physical problem would definitely affect your belief unconsciously and consciously in relation to this being a mind-body condition. So, okay, so thank you, Peter. Peter Miles is one of our SIRPA trained practitioners as well. He's a GP, and he's commenting on Catherine's comment, which is really good. Thank you, Peter. So Catherine was saying, have you ever heard of swollen thyroid nodules? I personally haven't. It sounds like, as Peter says, maybe the doctor's trying to give her a label. But if you think it's stress-induced and basically the thyroid is hugely impacted by stress, then I would suggest that, work on that side of things, explore it, just start considering what was going on at that time when it began, and just the more, even if we don't fully understand what has caused it, by doing more emotional awareness, by being kinder to ourselves, self-compassionate, becoming more emotionally aware, so we can see, become really aware of not just when we get a symptom, but actually when we get an emotion, and acknowledge and expressing that, because by acknowledging it, then we might not get the symptom. So it's becoming just more emotionally aware. So, so Catherine says, my GP's getting frustrated with her. My back was so bad for so long and then got better in 6 to 8 weeks with the Sano book, and now the foot. Okay, you can sort the foot out, Catherine. I've got no doubt about that. So you might need some help, but I'm sure you can deal with that foot as well. I dealt with mine, you can deal with yours. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Thank you very much, everybody, for all your questions. It gives us things to talk about. Otherwise, we might just be talking about our cats or walking, because actually Kay and I both live in Huddersfield, actually. So we do occasionally go off for a walk together now that we've been allowed to. Is there anything final a comment you'd like to make, Kay?
I don't think so. I think, well, yes, actually, the bit about the recognizing the emotions and things, that the last comment that you made, don't underestimate how hard it is and how long it takes to to get to grips with it, because I still struggle with it. I know when I've been triggered, but I don't always know what's triggered it. I have to sort of sit down and unravel it, and it does take time, and it's not something, if you've repressed those feelings since childhood because that's the way you were raised, then it's not going to be unraveled in a couple of weeks of journaling and things. You've got to dig deep.
I think that is important at sometimes, but also that can cause problems if you're digging and trying to find an answer, and actually because you're trying, then you might not be able to. But
I was meaning more in terms of it's I think we assume it'll be automatic, but it takes persistence to keep investigating, is what I mean by, not searching, but understanding what you're feeling, and
being open and being curious. Yeah, absolutely. And often just by using emotional awareness, that in itself can help. Peter, will you stop commenting like that? So Catherine said the doctor's not a very nice but very medical Dutch man. So Peter said buying the cake. Does that really work, Peter? Do people buy you cakes? And does that change things for you? Okay, we're going to leave it at that. Lovely to, I can't say see you all, but we will leave it at that. And thank you very much, everybody. And this has been recorded. It will stay on the Facebook page. And I will put a link to the Mind Body Wellness series in case anybody else wants to just explore things a bit more. For now, though, thank you very much. And thanks, Kay, for joining me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.